Okay, Harry, you're good to go.
Okay, and just to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Standards Committee, possibly the last one for a bit on Zoom, we don't know. Just to remind everybody about trying not to get disturbed by telephones, etc. during the meeting. Right, Matt, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor John Rest.
Okay, and yet Pierre is yet to join the meeting, eh?
Yeah, we haven't had any apologies from him as yet.
Okay, thank you. The minutes, does everybody...
Sorry, Harry, just before that one, there was no public questions received.
Oh, public questions. Have there been any public questions? No.
No.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I apologise. Right, minutes. If I go through the minutes page by page, just to make sure everybody's happy, and any comments. So, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, and to page 5. Okay, that's fine. Any matters arising from the...
Can I just have a... Sorry, Harry, just get a show of hands to see that everyone's happy to approve those minutes.
Could we have a show of hands?
Okay, noted, yeah.
Yeah. Any actions arising from those minutes? Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I just draw your attention to page 2 of the minutes, item 5, it's paragraph 27, item 27, paragraph 5. Just to update you that, well, you will know, I'm sure, that the Chief Executive has replied to us all, although it didn't provide a substantive answer to the question. But just to advise you that I have had a further meeting with the Chief Executive because I did want an answer. Answers, I have to say, I've had an answer, and as well as that, it has given rise to further questions, and they will continue. I will restrict my mentions to that, as I'm aware that not all members will support the matter being considered within the Standards Committee meeting, but I felt that you should at least hear that the matter has resulted in a further meeting, and I'm sure we'll reach a conclusion in due course.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dixon. I look forward to that time. Right, thank you. Okay, declaration. Items of urgent...
Just picking you up on that, Mr. Chairman, you said you look forward to that time. Does that mean that you would welcome a report at some future meeting from me?
No, I'm looking forward to when you are happy to feel that it has been resolved.
Thank you. I just needed to clarify that.
Okay. Councillor Perry-Warnes.
Thank you. I think if there's any possibility that it comes before the committee again, I'd like to have confirmation from the monitoring officer that it does indeed fall within our remit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think what we'll say is if it does fall, come live again, then we will seek that clarification then. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Perry-Warnes. Items of urgent business.
So none received.
Declarations of interest. There are none, apart from perhaps a slight general one that we're all councillors and we're discussing our code of conduct. So but, I don't think that is required. Right. Item 7, parish and district members register of interests and officer register of gifts and hospitality. Matt.
Yeah, there's nothing really to add there, just to say that they are always available to view.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, adoption, item 8.
Councillor Shiers has a hand raised.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Shiers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Matt. I just wanted to ask, as members, we get very kind reminders on a regular basis to prompt us to update register of interests and such. Do parish councils get the same, or is that to be managed by clerks and chairs?
Emma.
Well, I'll answer initially and then Cara can perhaps chip in. No, we rely on the clerks to some extent to do that, but depending how we move forward with the code of conduct, and my understanding is that now urging their members to also adopt the LGA code as it stands. I think we will then work with the clerks and have a push around working within the new guidance and reviewing the registers. I've been invited to speak to NALC hold regular meetings with their clerks, and I've been invited to speak at the May meeting. So that's one of the issues I'll be talking to them about, how we can work with them to make sure that they are regularly reminded and that they are completed as thoroughly as possible. So it is something that we don't do it at the moment, but I think going forward, we'd like to sort of strengthen that, particularly if we've all adopted the same code, which I'm hopeful of. So yes.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Shiers? Thank you very much. Okay, we move on to the adoption.
Sorry, Councillor Brown has a hand raised.
Sorry, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Yes, just following on from that, I think it's an appropriate time in the civic diary at this time of year, with parish council AGMs being arranged in May for perhaps it to be a standing item at least on every annual general meeting, when possibly new members are coming onto parish councils, that now recommend it's a standing item to remind members to keep their declarations of interest up to date. That's all I wanted to say, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Yes, I tend to agree. Right. Agenda item 8, adoption of the new code of conduct. And here we have Councillor Virginia Gay, who was chair of the Constitutional Working Party. I was wondering if Councillor Gay would like to present this in any way. Councillor Gay.
Hi. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. I'm just here today to say that we have considered this at length in the Constitution Working Party, and I think that you considered it too at your last meeting. And I'm just simply here to recommend that we adopt this. It's very firmly founded within the Nolan Principles. It's a very clearly laid out document. It does have the virtue that in the future, there might be some chance that we were, certainly across Norfolk, operating under the same understandings about what constitutes model conduct. I gather that hasn't progressed to fruition yet. There isn't an agreement across Norfolk, but that isn't any reason why we can't adopt the LGA model code of conduct. And I think the process would be, if you were agreed to this today, you would recommend it to full council. And then it would have to be agreed in full council. But I'm just here to say that, like you, we've given this a great deal of consideration in Constitution Working Party, and we think there's a lot to be said for going forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I open meeting to any councillors who wish to make a comment.
I just wonder, Harry, if Cara was
Oh.
quite obviously involved in that process of negotiating with other monitoring officers, if she wants to give an update at all on where they're at.
Sorry, Cara. Yes, please do.
That's okay. I think Councillor Gay has given a summary of the position thus far. What we were hoping to do as monitoring officers in Norfolk was to have a consensus with the hope that all Norfolk authorities could have one single code of conduct. So it would address the confusion that is sometimes currently in place with the different codes. Having a quick look before today's meeting, it seems that there's varying ways that different authorities are dealing with this model code of conduct. About 20%, I think, at this stage have adopted it as is. About 20% have adopted it with some amendments, and there's still other authorities that haven't implemented it yet, or are still considering the matter. I could outline the brief points of the new code of conduct if you'd like me to. There are a few significant changes. For example, the gifts or hospitality has increased from registering it from £25 to a value of £50. I think, speaking with the Constitution Working Party and yourselves previously, this model code of conduct is more definite in regard to declaring interests. And I know that there's some local authorities that have wanted to remove table 2 in regard to the declaring and leaving the room about other interests and personal interests. But I think the feeling of the Constitution Working Party and yourselves was more geared towards having a firmer code of conduct to follow. I don't know if there's anything in particular you would like me to address you on. As I say, I could outline the main points in the LGA model code of conduct if you'd like me to summarise them, or otherwise if you'd like to just discuss the matter, and I can answer any questions you may have as we go along.
I think the latter option. Councillor Dixon, I saw your pen move, Councillor Dixon. So yeah, yes. Were you wishing to speak?
Indeed, I was, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I just really want to follow up on the comments of Councillor Gay, just to endorse, I think, the comments that she made in terms of aspirations of getting all councillors to adopt a common code of conduct. I think that harmonisation would be a very worthy objective to strive to achieve. Not only would it achieve us, I think, having a common understanding across the county, and might even be wider than that, who knows? But certainly county-wide, that would be very helpful. And just think of the resource implications that there would be as well, without having so much time and effort being spent on each council having its own model and all that goes with it. So I'm all in favour of harmonisation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Perry-Warnes.
Thank you. I'm in favour of harmonisation too, very much. But I noted that the monitoring officer referred to some amendments that have been made by different authorities. And I wondered if she could clarify whether they will spoil that harmonisation or if they're just minor.
Cara Jordan. I'm afraid you're on mute, Cara.
Possibly, although there isn't, even if other authorities have adopted the code with amendments, it doesn't mean to say at some future date that we can't all get together and reconsider, depending on the various local authorities and whether their current code of conduct was fit for purpose, or whether they've had various questions in regard to their code of conduct. There may have been more pressure on them to finalise things quicker than perhaps would have suited us. But sorry, to go back to the question, it's unfortunate that we can't all do it together, but it doesn't preclude it happening in the future.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's every great journey starts with a little step, and this seems to be quite a big step for us. And it's very, I personally think it's a good idea that we have the same code of conduct in all councils, because it allows the general public to have a greater understanding of what restrictions we work under and the way we conduct ourselves. So I'm all for this. Anybody else have any comments? So I mean, we've already discussed it at previous meetings. So Matt, are we having a vote on?
Yes, you will.
Have to vote on this to say we should put this forward to full council.
Yes, because it's a formal recommendation to full council, you will need a proposer and a seconder, followed by a roll call vote.
Okay, so could I have a proposer for this? Councillor Shires and Councillor Dixon.
Okay, I'll just go through the names. So Councillor Blathwaite.
4.
Councillor Brown.
4.
Councillor Dixon.
4.
Councillor Parry-Warnes.
4.
And Councillor Shires.
4.
Okay, so that's all in favour.
Thank you. So thank you very much, everybody, for that. We go on to agenda item 9, the review of the member officer protocol. Do we have anybody speaking on this?
I think Emma's going to lead on this one.
Okay, thank you, Emma.
I'll just do a brief introduction, and then perhaps if Virginia would like to speak as chair of Constitution Working Party, because they considered this at their meeting on the 13th of April, and it's quite a lengthy discussion. So, but I'll just outline, why it's the reasons for the review. The report sets it out relatively clearly that there hasn't been an overarching review of this document for some considerable time. We've looked at small sections of it the last time in 2017, but we haven't reviewed the whole document. And with the code of conduct coming through, I felt it was time to review the document and look at strengthening it, so it sat alongside that code of conduct. But they are sort of considered together. If we have any standards complaints, both documents will be looked at, and obviously they both sit within the Constitution. So I looked at protocols from lots of councils, and most of them are much more robust than ours. Ours was very light, you can see where I've suggested the changes, but there's a lot more around the role definitions between officers and members, so that's much clearer now. There's some additional wording around behaviours, particularly bullying and harassment, how that can be dealt with. I'm hoping that it's much clearer. The Constitution Working Party did suggest some tweaks and moved some of the wording around, which I've highlighted in blue for you. But I think hopefully that this will be a much clearer, stronger document for members and for officers going forward, and particularly for new members and new officers, that it's something that we can use as a guidance document for them and as part of the induction session. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any relating to it. Just picking up a point that Councillor Brown raised at the start of the meeting, or before we started, the media relations protocol or section does sit within this document, but I have pulled it out because that was reviewed by Joe Ferrari, the communications manager. I felt he was better placed than I was to review that section. So that's why it's separated at the bottom. But actually it does sit within this wider protocol and it will be reincorporated. But I just felt it would make more sense to separate that out, as it had been, the review had been done by someone different to myself. So I don't know if Councillor Gay wants to speak at this point, just to sum up Constitution Working Party's comments, and then I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you very much, Emma. Councillor Gay.
Thank you. I'd just like to start by expressing thanks to Emma because she's put a great deal of work into this. It's true that we had looked, I think, in 2017 about a certain passage of this, but it hasn't had an overall review for many years. And it contained a certain amount of warm words about respect and trust and so on, but there was no spelling out of what people's individual roles were in this, what I could call this member officer drama of what it is your responsibilities are in different situations. And this plays out particularly, I think, when you're new, either as a councillor or sometimes as an officer too, to understand what other people have a right to expect of you and what they don't have a right to ask of you. So Emma has put a great deal of work into clarifying all of this in what we thought in the Working Party was a helpful way. But obviously you're a committee and it's up to you how you. I'm not sure if you have a separate document for media relations. A lot of time talking about the member officer roles, but we also spent a lot of time talking about the implications from social media for the future. And there was a strong feeling within the Working Party that we would all benefit from more discussion of social media and the way it can play out, more training. And I don't think people meant training on how to manipulate it, but how to think about the image that you're projecting and what you're saying. So these member officer roles and the implications of social media were the things that we spent quite a lot of time on. But I think this is a much stronger document. I think it can be used in induction. I think it will be helpful for individual members, and I think it gives people more protection. So we recommend it to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to say, you slightly broke up on, it might have been on my end. I've been having some problems, but I think I got the whole gist of what you were saying. Councillor Lucy Shires.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Gay, for your words. I would like to say that this is a really, really well thought out and extensive document. And I have enjoyed reading it, and I have, of course, self-checked against my own self to make sure, that I can understand and see where I would fit into this and understand the relationships I've got. What I wanted to ask was how wide the consultation with officers has been on this document, or would be, as it comes towards the final draft.
Councillor Gay.
I'm going to refer that question to Emma.
All right. Emma, sorry.
I have circulated it, obviously it's been shared at CLT level, so they're aware that I'm taking it through. And I have shared it with the HR manager as well, so he's seen the changes that I'm suggesting, and they've been kept informed through the process. So there has been a view that particularly the issue around behaviours, bullying, harassment and so on needed to be reflected within the Constitution more, which it currently isn't. That sits within a lot of officer sort of employee type guidance and so on, HR policies, and that hasn't been reflected in the Constitution. So it was felt that this was the best way to pick that up and build it into the Constitution. Hasn't gone out to wider staff, but if members are supportive, then I will share that through staff focus group and so on, and we'll make sure that officers are aware of the changes. So it's something that I will promote through the various officer groups and so on. And obviously I will, I attend staff induction, so I will share that with any new members of staff too. So they haven't been consulted widely on it because obviously the Constitution sits within members' gifts. It's very much full council's role to oversee that and sign off, but it's certainly something that we will roll out and make sure that officers are happy with and aware of the contents going forwards if you do support it.
Thank you. You happy, Councillor Shires? You're all right with that. Thank you very much. Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Virginia Gay and to Emma Denny for and the members of the Working Party for their work on this. I think this is a very readable document, so it would get a crystal mark from the Plain English organisation, I think, which is very welcome. I've just got a couple of things I just want to pick up on. On page 39 of the agenda in section 4.8, it's saying whilst members should always act in the public interest, there's nothing preventing them as politicians from expressing the values and aspirations of the political group to which they belong. Are we expected to restrict those expressions and aspirations purely to meetings of the full council? And in particular, that those expressions and aspirations should not come into the workings of particularly important committees like the Development Committee, like Overview and Scrutiny, and indeed this particular committee. So I just wondered if we could clarify that particular point. And the only other point I want to pick up on is in the next paragraph, 4.9, and also in section 16, and just to ask how members are going to be kept informed. At the moment, it seems that the committee agendas are probably one of the more recognised methods of communication. Is an officer expected to send a particular message to a member if there is something in their ward which is going to affect them? So it's merely a point of clarification, Mr. Chairman, on that. Thank you.
Well, both of those issues came up at Constitution Working Party. So the first point around expressing your values and aspirations of a political group, that is essentially so to make officers aware that it is an aspect to a member's role, that you do belong to political groups, and that it can be a driver behind certain behaviours and your aspirations and so on. So it's to be aware of that political aspect of the member's role. Referring to being political within committees, if you look at the point above, so 4.7, I have just mentioned there that for Development Committee in particular, there is a separate protocol that needs to be observed, and that specifically does set out the fact that it's a non-political committee and so on. And that's one of the things that I tried to do. You'll see that I've referenced all of the other relevant protocols within this, because I think that's where the Constitution hasn't always been clear to this point, that there is a linkage between them. And actually some protocols will build even more on some of these behaviours, and the political aspect within certain committees is certainly strengthened within that protocol. And when you look at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee procedure rules, it also references the fact that it's non-political committee and so on. So so that's really just to draw to officers' attention that that is a facet to members' roles, that they are also sometimes politically motivated, and they do belong to political groups, and to bear that in mind. The second issue around ward, keeping members informed, as Councillor Gay, I'm sure will say, it's a constant thread that has certainly come through Constitution Working Party, and that we've tried over a long period of time to try and strengthen this and you know, make sure that officers are aware that it's something that's very important to members, that they're up to speed on issues within their ward. This particular point was, I think, was around members' involvement across wards. So if you were in a neighbouring ward and you were aware of an issue, that out of courtesy, that you would let that your neighbouring ward member know that you were dealing with a matter and it might affect their ward. But certainly from the officer side, yes, we would expect officers to let you know if there was an issue bubbling away in your ward, or there was a matter coming through to committee and so on, at an early stage. So as local members, you are aware in case you're asked about it, but also so you can, you know, feed in or comment on that as well. So that, again, if this protocol is supported, that's something I will be going back through to the various officer groups and reminding them again that this is very much embedded in the protocol, and we do want to see officers doing that, and there is an expectation that that will be done consistently going forwards.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown, does that answer your queries?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Thank you, Emma, for that.
Thank you. I have Councillor Dixon and then I have Councillor Perry-Warnes. So Councillor Dixon is up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to pick up on some of the points that have been raised already, can I just clarify in relation to the first point regarding staff consultation? I think, Emma, I think you used the words that the staff would be made aware. Now that to me doesn't actually say that the staff will have the opportunity to contribute to the working document. And so I wonder if you might just go that little step further and give an assurance that not only will they see them, but they'll have the opportunity of contributing to them if they feel the need.
I'm happy to do that, Councillor Dixon. Yes, sorry, that did sound like it was a bit sort of telling them rather than inviting comments. So if the committee's minded to support this, and after the meeting, I will share the document and the changes so staff can comment or feed in if they want to. So I'm happy to take that on board.
Thank you. Then I'll move on really just to endorse the comments I think that Councillor Brown raised, particularly in respect of the assurance I think that I certainly look for, that in, I think I would say all of the committees actually, but I guess that's more enshrined in some than others, that we keep party politics out of committees. And I recognise that the main event for politics is full council, and I think I've heard you describe it as such, Emma, as the main event for the airing of politics and political views, and it has its place, and that's where its place should be. And I'm aware of the specifics with regard to planning and to overview and scrutiny, and I suspect licensing is another one that fits into the same. I find it hard actually to find a committee where party political expressions are found to be helpful. I find it harder to think of a committee where expressions of party politics is helpful. So I'm probably looking for a little bit of strengthening there, and to say that, you know, party politics are for full council meetings and nowhere else. Maybe that's a step too far at this stage, but that's the way my thinking goes. Similarly, I echo the matter of ward protocols. And I think that's a particularly challenging one, but I think it's also very important because it's so easy to be wrong-footed by not being aware of issues that are ongoing in your ward. And most of them, I think, are likely to relate to officer activities, rather than your neighbour's activities. It becomes slightly more difficult, I think, more fuzzy around that. But I think where there are particularly enforcement activities and things of that kind, you really ought to be aware of those. And I think they are particularly important. So they were the mentions that I just wanted to endorse, really. My own query was around just seeking clarification in relation to paragraph 11.2. So that's local members 11.2, where it says each chief officer. And I'm slightly confused by that because in the rest of the document, it refers to the chief executive. So are we slightly confusing and a little bit inconsistent here? As far as I'm aware, we only have one chief officer, and we generally refer to that chief officer as a chief executive. So is there a reason for why we have worded it in para 11.2 in that way?
So that's within the media protocol, I think, isn't it? So Joe Ferrari updated that, so he may not have been sort of familiar with the terminology. So I think we can change that. I think whether he means by, I suspect he means senior officers will keep, ensure that all relevant staff are aware. I'm sort of happy to take members' steer on that, whether you would prefer to see that says the chief executive, or whether you would want that broadened out to the sort of corporate leadership team. I guess the directors who are responsible for their service areas, that would sort of make more sense that it sat within the corporate leadership team. So I can change that if you're comfortable with it.
I think you need to establish what was meant by that that statement. If it means chief officers or chief executive, then we need some consistency around that terminology. I think it's more likely that it refers to directors or CLT. So if it's amended along those lines, then I can make sense of that.
I'll clarify that.
Yeah, I think we're all agreed on that.
That concludes my point, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Perry-Warnes was next, and then I'll go to Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I really agree very strongly with what Nigel was saying about not scoring party political points in normal committee settings. But my main question was in 4.9, where it says that members involved in an issue in another member's ward will speak with the relevant ward members. Just to clarify, does that include cabinet portfolio holders?
Yes, I would say that's across members. I think it's hard for me to say because I don't sort of have much knowledge of how this works. I think it's sort of just an accepted agreement between members that you will notify each other. I had an incident, I think, involving two members relatively recently. But yes, I would expect that to apply across all members, unless anyone has a different view to that. I don't know if Lucy, did you want to speak in response to that point? So I'll let, as a cabinet member, I'll let Lucy respond.
Okay, Councillor Shires and then Councillor Brown. I'm sorry about that, Councillor Brown, but you've been usurped.
Sorry, Councillor Brown, I didn't mean to. I just thought I would be able to offer some help. I think there's possibly a little bit of perhaps inconsistency depending on what it is. So if I think about our property services team, the communication on directly what's happening goes through the property services team, and I'm copied into it. So I will, see all the emails that everybody else sees in terms of what's going on with property services. But I'm not sure if that's consistent across all portfolios or all officers. So I don't know if each portfolio holder has got the same communication. I was going to say guru, that's probably the wrong word. If I think about Officer Tanner, he's very communicative when it comes to letting people know what's going on. I don't know if every department has got the same level of communication, or if it is left to the cabinet member to do it. So that could possibly do with some clarification, to be fair.
suppose what I would say is that this section, I don't know if there's a bit of confusion. So this section is really around if you're dealing with a matter that crosses boundaries from your ward. So I had an incident recently where a member was dealing with the county council in relation to a highways matter that was going into a neighbouring member's ward. So it was just around making the neighbouring member aware that there was an issue that crossed ward boundaries. So it's not so much around, the thing with Lucy talking about the property services thing, I would expect officers to some extent to pick up and notify all of the relevant ward members in relation to that. But this is really around sort of constituency type matter. You know, if you've got an issue that a resident has raised, but perhaps it crosses both wards, it might be a drainage issue or something, and it also affects the neighbouring ward. So it's around just working with your neighbouring ward members to make sure that they're aware, because it may also impact on their constituents. You know, you might both be working on the same issue and not even realise. So it's around just that sort of courtesy of keeping each other informed effectively. So that's what that section relates to. But I can, if that's not clear, perhaps I should just strengthen that wording a little bit so it is a bit clearer that that's what that particular section is around.
Thank you. I had Councillor Brown next and then Councillor Perry-Warnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no problem being usurped by Councillor Lucy Shires. In fact, she would be very near the top of the list of people that I would prefer to be usurped by if I had to publicise one. So I'm just taking us back to the issue of the wording in 11.2 of the media protocol. I see that elsewhere in the document there are specific references in 11.4 and 11.5, I think, for example, to the chief executive, which I think Councillor Dixon pointed out in fairness. I'm just wondering if it would work if the wording in the previous section, 11.1, the council via relevant officers will ensure that all relevant staff. It would make it quite consistent with the previous paragraph. Just a thought. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Emma, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, I think that would work. I'll just check with Joe Ferrari what his intention was, whether but if he's happy with that wording, I think that works quite well. It seems quite consistent to me, and it means that you know, it covers section 11.2 quite clearly then. But I'll just clarify with him that, you know, that he's happy to go with that wording.
Thank you. Councillor Perry-Warnes, I'm sorry you've been waiting.
Well, actually, I'm going back because my original question, which Emma and Lucy were answering, I'm going back to that one because I didn't get a chance to comment on that. That's all right. Emma, I really would appreciate it being clarified to actually incorporate the cabinet portfolio holders, keeping members informed when they are operating on matters in their ward. Sorry. So, you know, I don't think that's very clear because I don't think that does happen. Lucy, I'm sure that you do, but I personally have had that not happen with me. So thank you.
Okay. Anybody wish to come back on that comment? Emma?
Are members broadly supportive of changing that section? Just
actually, personally, I don't mind it being strengthened slightly. I mean, I too have had the occasional issue where something has been happening in my ward and I have not been made immediately aware of it.
I'm happy to change that. Yep, absolutely. If you're all supportive, then I'll add that into that section.
I think everybody is supportive of that. It sort of nods and heads. Yes, I'm seeing lots of nods and heads. And I think it's also true that if you have an issue in your ward, you should tell neighbouring wards about it. I certainly try to, as I hope Councillor Dixon is aware of the recent one. Okay, Councillor Shires.
Thank you. I just wanted to refer to the mental health champion role that I hold. And Councillor Perry Warnes will be aware of, where I have been able to discuss cases. I have made sure the local member, I think you might remember a case a while ago in Holt where I thought you might be able to help. But on the whole, I think if somebody comes to me wanting mental health support or services, I generally wouldn't go to a member because it's quite confidential unless there was extra support with housing or accessing services that I thought a local member could help with, and I had permission of the resident who'd contacted me. So I just want to make that quite clear, that mental health perhaps wouldn't fall under the same category as general day-to-day council business.
Yeah, I think that's, I think we would all understand and sympathise with that. Councillor Gay.
Thank you, yes. It's an interesting question. When I have something that I know is going to affect a particular member and their ward, I try to privately get in touch with that person and tell them about it, or warn them. And that's a reasonable thing to do, because if you expect other people to support you, you need to tell them what's going on. But I suspect where there might be something that affects every single member, it's not necessarily practical to call up and have a conversation with every single person. You might hope that an officer would alert all people to something like that. So I think it's something you have to always endeavour to do, but I can think of circumstances in which it might be quite difficult to get it done. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is everybody okay with that? So what we're coming to is a conclusion, Matt, are we voting on this, or are we?
I will just note, obviously there's been quite a few little changes that have been suggested by the committee, and the second recommendation there does kind of give an allowance for that, in that it says that following any further amendments by the Standards Committee, so as those have been kind of discussed and taken on board by Emma to implement, you are with that recommendation covering that essentially. So yeah, it's just a case of, again, because you are recommending it to council for approval, you'll need a proposer, a seconder, and a roll call vote.
All right, on the understanding that our suggestions are taken on board, could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Shires and a seconder, Councillor Brown. Could we have a vote?
Yep, okay. Councillor Blathwaite?
For.
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Dixon?
For.
Councillor Perry Warnes?
For.
And Councillor Shires?
For.
Okay, so that's all in favour. Sorry, Harry, you're muted.
Yeah, almost the only time or meeting. Right. So, are we content that any other business or anything else to discuss today?
Is Cara still here? I don't know if she has any updates to provide for item 10 at all.
Cara.
I'm still here, yes. No, I don't have any updates in regard to item 10 at the moment.
I see Councillor Dixon has a hand raised.
Oh, Councillor Dixon, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of points, I think, to raise in relation to whether we should be receiving updates on complaints progression of complaints. I would, for my part, would find it very helpful to know how many complaints we've got running and how long they've been running and when they are likely to anticipate to be completed. I don't want to know the details, but I think the broad picture of the number of complaints, as I said, and where we are in terms of progression. And my reasons for raising that are twofold. I'm aware of one complaint made 8 months ago. The complainant has yet to receive a response or an outcome. And that seems like a long time to me for a complaint to be outstanding. I'll leave that one hanging. The other is that I'm aware of another complaint made in October of last year. It took 5 months for that complaint to reach the subject councillor. Now, they may not be of themselves indicative of the overall situation, but I would hope that most of us would recognise that that's not a good place to be in terms of dealing with complaints. There is a saying which says justice delayed is justice denied. And I think that applies to both councillors making the complaint and those the subject of the complaint. So, Mr. Chairman, if I have any point really to make here is that I would routinely like to see an update on where we are with regard to complaints in the broad spectrum, without going into where details and names and types of complaints and so on and so forth. So that's where I would like to propose that we have an update on this every meeting.
Cara, your hand is raised. Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy to do that at every meeting. In regard to the two matters that you spoke about, one of them, I know the reason for that particular delay. The other one, obviously, we're not talking about which cases they are, but I'm happy to speak to you separately and have a look at that. Just roughly, I haven't got the figures ahead of with me right at the moment, but there are currently approximately 10 matters for North Norfolk District Council, and that includes the parish councils as well that are currently in progress.
Cara, do we have a split between issues involving the district council as opposed to the parish councils?
Yes, there's significantly more code of conduct complaints in regards to the parish and town councils. I mean, part of that is because there's so many more members, of course, than North Norfolk District Council. And I would also say that there are those parish and town councils which have proportionately more code of conduct complaints than others.
Yeah, I'm aware. Okay, thank you. Councillor Shires.
Thank you. I was actually speaking in support of what Councillor Dixon had raised. It would be very helpful to have the report, I think. And it would also be helpful to understand if how many code of conducts are raised where there's no code of conduct found to be broken or breached, or however the terminology is, just that we can get a broader picture of how it's, you know, of how it lies, and whether or not, you know, we need to provide more education for people or clarify things going forward, because I know that, you know, they take a lot of time to investigate. And I know that when people make complaints, they do it genuinely because they feel that something's happened, and it might just be that perhaps a little bit of education could prevent misreporting, as opposed to, you know, not understanding how to report correctly. So I would completely support Councillor Dixon's suggestion that we receive a report.
Thank you. go to Emma and then to Cara, if I may, Cara, sorry.
I just wanted to say that we did used to include a summary at the end of the agenda, so which would have break them down by number, by district councillor and parish councillors, but also whether they'd met the threshold for a breach of the code. So I can pull that out, the format, to help Cara, because obviously she's not done that before. So and share that with you to check that you're happy with how it was presented previously. But that would be, I think it's useful, but it's also quite useful, removing the detail, obviously, of the complaints, but for the public, for transparency as well, so they can see the numbers of complaints coming through and whether they have been a breach of the code and so on. So I'm happy to look back and pull that out, so and we can put that on agendas going forwards.
I think that's a very good idea. For me, I would be fully supportive of this. Cara.
Thank you. Firstly, apologies, that isn't something that I'd dealt with previously, having not attended these meetings that often, but I'm very happy to assist there. I would add a couple of points in response to Councillor Shires in regards to the Code of Conduct complaints, and Emma touched upon this as well. When someone makes a Code of Conduct complaint, it doesn't go straight to an investigation. There is almost like a sifting process to see if it meets the threshold, so that does it potentially breach the Code of Conduct. And the other matter that I will raise, just to give you some idea, is that I would say that a majority of Code of Conduct complaints are by one councillor against another councillor, rather than by a member of the public against a councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Dixon, I'm sorry you dropped out for a minute there. Do you need any further clarification?
No, I think barring the bit that I missed, and I think I'm probably recognise that there's support for further information. I was just amazed actually when I looked at the agenda and I thought about previous meetings, and I thought, why are we not seeing this? Because it's pretty germane to what we're about, and so therefore I think it's a major omission. I don't think I caught the explanation from, if there was an explanation from Emma, as to why it was dropped.
I don't really know, Councillor Dixon, I have to say. It hasn't appeared. I think the committee went through a long period of not meeting very regularly, and I think at that point, for whatever reason, it wasn't brought forward. But I don't think there's a specific reason for dropping it, but I'll certainly look back and see when it last came through. We did used to have a lot more complaints. It used to be quite a substantial document. I think they have dropped off in number, but I do agree. I think it certainly sits within the remit of the committee to be reviewing that, and that's, yeah, I agree that we should bring it back so you can see.
I think it's not only within the remit, it's pretty central to what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I do agree. So I will go back and see when we last reported it, and share that format. And if there's anything else you'd like to see included or any changes, then Cara and I can look at that and make sure it's covered for the next meeting.
Okay, I think all of us are agreed that that needs to be done. So thank you very much. Anybody else wish to comment on the subject? No. Right, I don't think we need to exclude the press and public. And so if it's all right by all you members, that we wrap this up and say thank you very much. And yes, we'll be meeting in person, and we can see who is wearing pajamas and holy slippers. And their lower halves, or their top halves, are quite tidy. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, and I appreciate it very much, your attendance. I know this is a hard time when everybody's out canvassing and knocking on doors, etc. So thank you very much for your attendance. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.